Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben Surdy, and today I actually had a lot of requests. When I'm coaching my clients, I've got different clients that I work with, so I coach them on taking themselves to the next level, but also taking their company to the next level. And obviously, those two things come in full contact, right? If you're not taking yourself to the next level, then you can't really take your business to the next level. And I know that from personal experience, right? There's been times in my life where I'm not living to my fullest, potential capability personally wise, and that can actually translate into stagnation in the business. And so today, I wanted to kind of share a topic that I think a lot of people would gain benefit from. They'd gain a lot of value from it because it worked for me in a major, major way. And it's one of the, people always ask me, is there kind of some secret that you could share? Maybe something that's not as obvious or that's not talked about a lot online. And so I thought about it, and I thought about my whole life and wanted to share something that I think if you use this strategy, it's going to create a tremendous, tremendous impact. And it's what I call tasting your dreams. So, when I go back in time, I'm going to go back to a specific period of time. I was about 21 years old. And guys, up until that point, I'd been kicked out of every school that I went to. I didn't graduate high school. I developed a reputation and kind of formed an identity around this, that I was a troublemaker and that things always kind of negatively happened to me. And I really did create a personal reality in my life that proved that to be true. And that's when I really realized the power of your thoughts, because your thoughts create emotions and your emotions create feeling. And whatever you're feeling, not to get too scientific and whooshy-gooshy, but the feelings that you feel is what ultimately creates your reality. So the question that I had to answer for myself was, how do I create a different reality? And how do I change my personality to create a different personal reality? And so I had to do a lot of deep thinking. During this period of my life, I, basically reached a breaking point where I was frustrated. I was beaten down. I was kind of out of gas in my tank. I remember the night that I got my third DUI. And, I came home and my wife was awake. I got home early in the morning after getting arrested and booked on my third DUI. And I knew what was coming from that. I knew there was going to be a lot of negative consequence associated with that. And my wife at that point basically said, I'm leaving you. We had my first son and she just said, I can't do this anymore, And I didn't blame her, but I really had to look deeply into my own issues. How did I get here? There's one truth in this life is whether you're unsuccessful or you're successful, it's your fault. And that rationale really hit deep with me. And so I really started reading. First of all, I decided, So there's one thing that you got to do is you got to decide, I am going to be successful. And I had to really articulate, what does that mean? So a lot of the time when I'm coaching somebody, I always ask them a couple questions. Say, number one, do you think you deserve success? And I watch how they posture, their eye contact, their body language. Do you deserve success? Because that's the first thing we got to work through. And then secondly to that is I always ask them, if they say, yes, I deserve success, then I say, so tell me what success looks like. And this is the fun part. This is where you get to use your imagination and create a vivid picture of what success looks like. And so I go through an exercise with them to have them really paint a vivid vision of what that success looks like. And when they do, you can kind of see a part of their eyes brighten up. You can see a part of them become alive. And let's explain why. It's kind of like what I said was, when you allow yourself to think different thoughts, those thoughts become emotions. You actually feel an emotion when you're thinking about this future state of possibility. And through those emotions, you create a new feeling. And when you create a new feeling, your body and your brain can rewire itself. It can create a new operating system based on those emotions and feelings. And that's what's required to actually change your life, is you've got to change your thoughts. You've got to change your emotions. You've got to change your feelings. And when you change those three things, all of a sudden life starts playing out in a different film, is how I like to describe it. So the movie that was playing for me back then was pretty lame movie. I mean, it was a pretty lame movie that if I didn't change something, if I didn't change my thoughts and my emotions and my feelings, I was probably going to wind up in prison, and I wouldn't be speaking to everybody today. But because I was able to change my thoughts, I started reading a lot, and I realized that I really needed to expose myself to a new layer of information. And if I could expose myself to a new layer of information, it would allow my thoughts to change. You see, when you're trying to change your thoughts, you're basically operating off an old software system, and you learned a lot of how to operate from growing up as a kid, how your parents acted, how your friend group acted, how do your aunt and uncle act, how did they respond to anger, how did they respond to emotion. All of that stuff was really learned in the first 8 years of your life. And then as you move into your teen years, you basically attract people that share the same common beliefs, thoughts, and their expression of emotion and feeling. And before you know it, you become an adult. You're 18, you're 20, you're 25 years old, and you've built an entire infrastructure off of what you've learned as a child. So part of what I had to do is do a lot of reading. I read a lot from Earl Nightingale, who is arguably one of the best, personal development people that there ever was. Started reading a lot of Napoleon Hill. So by digesting a lot of this new information, it gave me a new way of thinking and a new way to logically start creating new thoughts. And I'm going to get to my actual point, which is the taste your dreams. Okay, so I'll kind of cut to that. Once you start educating yourself, you've started thinking differently, feeling different emotions and feelings, and kind of restructuring your personal reality. The next thing is that was undeniable, a secret weapon that I've instructed people to do. Some of them have taken that advice, some of them haven't. But I'm going to share with you what I did. So at the time that I started practicing this, keep in mind, I was completely bankrupt. I had started a mortgage company. I was about 19, 20 years old. I went and studied to get my broker license. Through the Department of Financial Institutions, I studied for it. I got my license, and I started a company called Elite Capital Lending Group. And I was down in my garage, and I was cold calling just complete strangers in Hawaii. And I'd look up different states that had, big home values. And my goal was to get them to refinance so that I could make a commission and or restructure their debt structure to help them, and then I would win too. So I'm down there working, and push came to shove where the mortgage market actually was crashing. The subprime market had completely caused havoc in the industry to where bank lines froze up. So all these leads that I had going of people that really were ready to go, all of a sudden the entire mortgage market found themselves unable to place those loans, which is what resulted me in going bankrupt. Unfortunately, I was racking up credit cards and purchasing things like furniture and TVs, trying to live a lifestyle, but I didn't have the income to support some of the buying decisions that I was making. And so that led to the situation of me going bankrupt. In life, and I'll get back to my point, in life, sometimes God puts you through these really, really painful lessons to create and open another door. And that couldn't have been more true because I went bankrupt and I got a third DUI and I was broken down to my knees, really like screaming out for help. I started a carpet cleaning company. And through desperation, I remember sitting on the couch with my wife and being like, I got to go out and make money like now. I had my first son at that point. And so we sat there and we're like, she said, why don't you start a carpet cleaning company? Cause that's what my dad had done. I knew how to do it. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't want to start a carpet cleaning company. Like that just doesn't, cause at this point I'm wearing suits and I felt, like a white collar, successful guy. And to me, for some reason, going into being a carpet cleaner just didn't align with what I wanted. But she's like, why don't you start a carpet cleaning company? And I was like, okay, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, is what I told her. So we created the idea and I started that company. Now I'm going to fast forward and I'm also going to get back to my actual rule and my recommendation for you. But if you fast forward, what wound up happening through very clear vivid vision building and using one of the secrets I'm going to share with you, I not only built a successful carpet cleaning company that was one of the highest rated companies in Washington, and I wound up building a company that transcended into the 20 million in revenue mark, becoming Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies and doing all these incredible things. But the reason that happens isn't just from working hard. I'm a relentless hard worker. I mean, I'll outwork anybody. But without the vivid vision and tasting your dream, I don't think a lot of that can happen. So here's what I did. So I'm going back to being dead broke. I went to a car dealership and I forget what the name of the dealership was. It was in Seattle, but they sold very expensive European cars, BMWs, Mercedes, all those kind of cars. Now, keep in mind, I couldn't afford it. So realistically, what you need to do when you use this tool is block out what you believe to be reasonable. Okay. The world and reality is not reasonable. It's what you create it to be. So what I would do is I'd go down to the dealership and I'd walk up to the sales guy and they're like, how can I help you? And I'm like, hey, I'm here to look at this BMW, and this was back then it was a 2004. So it was a new BMW. And he's like, absolutely. That's a beautiful car, and I said, absolutely. I'm looking to buy one and I'd like to test drive it. So I gave him my license and I said, I'd like to drive it by myself because sometimes they'll kind of jump in the car with you. And I wanted to really focus in on my emotions and my feelings when I did this. So I said, can I drive it myself? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And so I hopped in the car and I started driving down the road and I wrapped my hands around the steering wheel. I can still remember it. The leather steering wheel, the smell of this BMW, this fresh leather smell. I mean, I've never driven a car like this. I'd always driven cars that were, $4,000 cars, you call them kind of junkers. And I remember driving down the road and watching how people looked at me or my perception changed. I got filled with this feeling and this emotion of rawness, of like my heart changed, my energy changed. And I put down the gas pedal and I felt the car going through the turns and man, it just lit me up. And I really held on to that feeling, and I anchored it to my why. And so as I started kind of forecasting my vivid vision, writing out exactly what I was going to achieve by what date, I now had tasted my dream. I physically sat in that car, wrapped my hands around the steering wheel. And I remember I pulled over and closed my eyes and just really let the emotions of it sink in and held it deeply, right? So that's the first thing I did. Now, the second thing I did was we started touring, like $1 million homes. And back then, $1 million home was not what it is today. $1 million home back then was a mansion, you know? So I got my wife in the car and we would start looking at homes. You know, we dress up, we'd pull into an open house, we'd walk in and we would tour that home, but not just looking around. I would literally visualize Chelsea making dinner in the kitchen, me sitting on the couch with my feet kicked up on the coffee table, the fireplace on, and I would go into a mental reality of what this would feel like. Where would we put our bedrooms? Where would our Mason's bedroom be? I'd open the garage door and I'd picture my car in that garage and I would let myself feel what that felt like. I was tasting my dream. And your brain doesn't know the difference between a dream or reality. It really, all of your internal chemicals start rewiring themselves based on this being your new reality, you know? So we tasted our dream. And from that point moving forward, what I did was we started looking online. And I said, we got to pick our dream house. Now, keep in mind, I was doing like a couple $1,000s a month in revenue. I had just started the company and I'm out there just, you know, cleaning carpets, trying to make money. But we cut out a picture of the house that we wanted, like to the T. And I printed it out and I put it on my bulletin board, you know, my thumbtack board behind my computer. And every day, and I also pinned the car. Every day I woke up, I looked at this home, I looked at this car, and I closed my eyes and I just remembered the feelings that I had when I was walking through that home. And I felt it, you know what I mean? So that's one of my secrets that I share with people is that if you don't think that this is real, you're wrong. It really does work. Because had I never tasted sushi, okay, I'll give you another example. This is a stupid example, but I never had tried sushi. My wife loved it. And I couldn't imagine like eating raw fish. I remember the first time that I had raw fish, I almost puked because the texture, the smell and taste of it, I'm just like, oh my God. But after eating it a couple more times and tasting it, it became my favorite food. My body actually like rewired itself to love sushi. And so this is what you can do in your life. If you're sitting there right now and you've been kind of teetering or occupying shallow water where you haven't really swam into the deep end of your dreams, I want you to go out this weekend or next weekend, but pick a date. And I want you to go and allow yourself to taste your dream. Okay. I want you to go house shopping. I want you to walk into the home and you're going to act as if you can afford it. Don't worry about if you're not making enough money right now. That's not the point. I want you to go test drive the car. For me, it was the car. For me, it was the house. Another thing we did, you know, to taste the dream is we would book, you know, maybe only a couple days we'd book and it would cost me like $800, which was a ton of money back then. But we'd book these vacations so that I could be around wealthy people, so that I could feel what it felt like to live in that environment. And again, it's all about tasting the dream. And if you taste it enough, just like the sushi, you're going to develop a craving for it, and your body and your reality will ultimately achieve that goal. I promise you. So if you're sitting there right now and you're feeling lost and you're unsure of how to get to the next step, just know that I did it. I went from a kid that was kicked out of every school, was arrested 26 times, spent a lot of time in jail, high school dropout, where everybody thought I was a troublemaker, to, you know, and not to throw money around, but to be now being worth over $50 million. I can really do anything that I want. I can go anywhere I want, but it happens based on using these principles so that you can achieve your wildest dreams. I see so many people that are thinking logically instead of thinking emotionally and with your heart forward. They're thinking logically, like logically, I can't afford that home. Why would I go look at it? Logically, I can't afford that car. Why would I go look at it? And they're missing one of the best secrets that they could ever use in the tool belt of success. So I want you to go out. This is your instruction from Coach Ben, is I want you to go out and I want you to taste your dreams. Be specific. You're going to be the architect of your future life, and you're going to go out and you're going to taste some of that dream. And when you do that, I then want you to build a vision board, and I want you to look at it every day and just trust that life will unfold. Whatever your belief is, God will put things into your path. There's going to be opportunities. You just have to pay attention. You've got to listen for the knock at the door. If you miss the knock at the door, that's your fault. So once you put this into the atmosphere, into the universe, things will happen. Okay, I'll give you another example of how it happened to me. I told you I'd started the carpet cleaning company, and I had this big vision. Okay, at this time we were living in a cul-de-sac house. Well, opportunity knocked. This guy, I'll leave his name out, but he called me. He said, "Hey, I've got a water damage company and I want to sell it to you. You're a good leader. You're a good, business guy. I'm not as good of a leader and business guy, but I know how to do water damage." Okay. And so I remember sitting there leaning back in my chair and thinking, like, this is the knock at the door. This is what I asked for. I'd cut out this home. I cut out this car, and I'm getting the knock at the door. So I opened it and I said, "Sure, let's get together. Let's have a meeting." Well, it turns out I wound up acquiring that company. It didn't go well. Let me just tell you, it didn't go well. In fact, part of what allows me to be a good coach is that I've lost a lot. I've suffered a lot, so with suffering comes wisdom. I bought that company. He showed up a month later after we were starting to get things going, and he showed up with a U-Haul truck at 3 a.m, loaded up all the equipment that I'd bought, and drove away to Utah. And so I found myself in the water damage industry with zero experience while running a carpet cleaning company that was doing really well at that time. And I'm like, what the hell do I have? Like, I have no business being in water damage. I know nothing about it. But guys, what that created was the most successful water damage company in Washington State, Pure Dry Restoration. Because I was put in that position and I listened to the knock at the door, and then I worked hard and I had my vision board. I just followed an intense level of commitment, and I built one of the most successful water damage companies out there. And I later wound up selling both my companies for a lot of money. But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not used this secret. So I hope that secret gives you some value today. Go out there and crush it. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, or if you're looking to take your personal life to the next level, visit me online at bensurdy.com. Check me out online on YouTube, on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be. Find me, look me up. You got to have the right people in your circle, and you got to have the right thoughts to create the right emotions, to create the right feelings, and you're going to have success. I guarantee it. All right. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching.